Hello, I'm back with Stephen, and we're here to continue reading The Secret History of the Shadow Campaign that saved the 2020 election, the Time magazine article by Molly Ball. So, Stephen, tell us a bit about this article.
Hello, everyone. So we've been discussing this very brazen article from Time magazine about how some very wealthy and influential people were able to shape the election in favor of their preferred candidate. Now, notice my words carefully. I didn't say who it was because they themselves didn't say that. But from what we've said, and if you read the article yourself, it's pretty clear who we're talking about. Yeah. Now, I stumbled upon this article, as I mentioned before. There was an excerpt from it. I didn't think it was real, so I went and looked up the article and read it myself. Turns out it was real, so Silas and I decided to do a video on it.
And this is the thing, we're still wondering kind of what's going on. Right now, the impeachment trial is going, and this is the third impeachment because they did an initial attempt to impeach him, and that didn't go through even the Senate. I think that was back in 2017. It might have been earlier than that. He started talking about this before he was even in. And then they had the one in 2019 that was happening. Some of you might have forgotten what happened with that. While the pandemic was starting to spread in the United States of America, much of the government was still quite embroiled. At least half of the United States government was still embroiled in the impeachment process of one Donald J. Trump, the 45th president of the United States of America. And Nancy Pelosi had led that. Then she had found some time to go to Chinatown in. I think it was Chinatown in New York. I don't know. Was it in New York or did she actually go back to California?
I think she went to San Francisco.
She went back to the San Francisco one, that's where she's from. So it was something like that, and she was like, just come down to Chinatown. There's no problem, things like this. So that was what she was doing while that was going on. But there was an impeachment trial then. And then this is going to be the third technical attempt at impeachment, because impeachment is, for some of you who don't know, he's already been impeached. Now, after the actual impeachment itself, now it goes to the actual case. And then when the case happens, there's a lot of different things happening. And part of what I was wondering with this article was maybe they found out that some of the things that are in this article were things that were going to be mentioned by Trump's team. So they decided, let's get in front of it. And this is my premise of this is like, I want to believe as many true things as possible and few false things as possible about reality. And that's kind of borrowed from Matt Dillahunty. And with this, I'm thinking this is positive either way because X happened. People understand some things happened in the last election. There's some things that are very clear. It's very questionable. Like looking into the room where you see those people pulling out those ballots from underneath the table. Those are kind of things you're wondering, what's going on here? So X happened. Before this article and a lot of other things, there's a lot of people who, like Trump and other people, have been saying it's Y, it's Q, it's N, it's H, and now they're saying no, it's none of those things. It's Z. So this is a Z that they're explaining. So I was thinking part of it is them coming out, could just be a victory lap, could be a thing where it's like a villain who feels they've finally won and everything, and then they feel the need to monologue before they have, or it just could be somebody who actually has won because they have won. Joe Biden is in, Trump is out. These people, that was part of their main thing that they're doing. So in that case, they've won. And then people, sometimes when they've won, they just want to gloat. They're like, we have the power. We don't have to we don't have to hide. We don't have to do anything anymore. We can just tell you, and what are you going to do about it? That could be part of it. So there's many reasons for why they're doing it. And just before this, we were talking, and it's a question to anybody else listening. Who do you think the primary kind of demographics, groups of demographics or primary demographic this is for? Like, who do you think would actually read this? Do you think the people who are really supportive care? Do you think it's the people who are reading every single anti-Trump or about Trump book during the last 4 years of the cottage industry of Trump watching? Who do you think this was for? That's kind of an ongoing thought that's been through my mind, and I just want everybody else out there to think about it. Anything else?
Well, I was going to say, I mean, what I keep thinking with this article is it's their way of sort of like, okay, the people know something is suspicious. We want to sort of like lay it on them gently. So it's like frame it in a way that it sounds like, well, okay, we admit we did this thing, but this is for good reasons. Like I was just thinking to myself with the whole Wall Street bet things and the short squeeze and all that. I mean, that's a whole conversation. But I've been thinking about some of the justifications. Like Robinhood is even saying things like, we're limiting shares because we want to maintain. We want to limit market volatility. We're not protecting hedge funds. They just say that. But then Citadel Group is one of their biggest clients, and then they sell the information to hedge funds. So everyone's like, "Come on, guys, really?" But it's like they're trying to frame it in a way that it seems a way. And then some of these comments in the group chat on the stock after is so funny. Like it's a Poe's law. Like I don't know if these people are being serious or it's satire. Somebody writes, "He's saying this is a good stock is rooted in anti-Semitism. Trying to destroy hedge funds is rooted in anti-Semitism. Look at all these anti-Semitic Trump supporters." And it's like you don't know if it's satire or if it's like this person actually believes. Some people wrote like "get help immediately" and things like that.
That's one thing that I think when you're talking to people, unless you've established that they're very serious and specific with their words, you hear them say something. This is in general parlance. This is something that has spread outside of the United States of America. If you're hearing this, you probably are involved in some kind of lexicon of people who speak this way. The whole like lead speak where people aren't that serious. LOL, just kidding. Like if somebody types LOL, you don't actually think they are laughing out loud. Like, but people just use LOL, like whatever. Like I say like a lot when I'm doing that. I listen to myself like I need to turn that down a bit. But I remember being back in high school when like started coming around, like whatever used to start coming around, and then it's like why are people saying that? And then there's people more on the urban side like nah I mean. They kept saying that over and over again. Nah I mean. I'm like why? Like I know just tell me what you mean. Don't keep asking nah I mean. But then that's some fact of people not really understanding each other. People using the same words, but the words mean different things. And problems occur not because of what X is, because of how you define X. So you get to a point where if somebody says something, somebody says racist, don't automatically think that they literally mean somebody has done or made a statement stating that their position is they prefer this thing over this other thing based off of race. When somebody says racist, that could mean a myriad of things. It could be power structures involved in it. It could be something that was more racial. It could be something that didn't really have to do with race at all. Like it could just be a thing that somebody just said and somebody just thought. So when somebody says something, before taking them for their word, kind of try to establish what kind of person they are. Specifically, if you're talking to certain people in the social political sphere in the United States of America, in a open kind of place of social media, if they say something has happened, listen to it, then turn it down to like a 2. Because these are people who believe in microaggressions. These are people who believe in these micro realities and these micro wins. Like, this is the greatest day of my life. You don't really think they mean that. So why are we going to take them seriously when they say Trump is a Nazi, for example? They don't literally mean that. Like, they can't literally know what Nazis were and then also say Trump is a Nazi. They can't, both those things can't exist. Maybe they really know what Nazis are, but they really don't know what Trump is. They can't both know what Nazis were and have any general idea of who Trump is, United States of America, and think and call him a Nazi in that kind of sense. It's just not realistic to believe that. So that's something that I'm trying to do, something that I'm advising y'all out there do as well. Maybe you have some advice of why I should and not, but there might be a few people that do. But in general, come on, some of the things they say are just, there's some absurdities going on in some of the things they say, and you don't take people serious all the time, so don't take everything that they say serious. And that's something that I'm saying both to repeat and hopefully that can be part of the lens that I approach the world with.
Yeah, I was thinking, I just wanted to go through clips of old shows and movies on YouTube, and I was watching Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. That was one of my favorite shows, still kind of is. I think of like when Will talks to his uncle, and he's like, the plane ride was dope. He's like, excuse me? The plane ride was stupid. Excuse me?
Yeah.
He's like, dope, stupid. He's like, how would you say, oh, the plane was really neat. It's kind of like that. Like, you have to make sure. It's like, does the person mean those words literally? It's like, no, that's, slang.
That's a positive thing to do. And speaking of Fresh Prince, they're streaming them on some service, like HBO Max or something, and now they've put a trigger warning or some kind of warning in front of them. I saw that come up. It was Fresh Prince and some other older show are being streamed, but now they've added some kind of trigger warning for content because I guess people have changed. There's people whose minds would watch some of the stuff in there and just not be able to deal with it. But I mean, that's the kind of world we live in, and those are the people who are taking account of that. Like that's the thing. Like things that used to trigger people don't. If you go to the Middle East, a Muslim majority country that runs with like a Sharia law kind of system based off of the Quran, you're going to know that there's certain things that you can say in New York City that you wouldn't be taken the same way there. But I think people have that false misconception because we're all speaking English. We're all in the United States of America. We're all even in New York City. And they might think, just because I met you in New York City, but understand people have those reality tunnels they carry around with themselves. There's some people who are as tense about certain topics as the mullahs or high clerics would be in a completely like run by the Quran community and culture. But when you go there, you would pay attention. And of course, there's a threat that they have that it would, in some cases, it would chop hands off, kill you, and do these other things based off of that. But these other people also in the West who you might walk by, they might have those same pretensions and find those to be as offensive and worth doing those things, but they don't necessarily have the power to do those things. But then there's other things they'll do to take you down, like just recently with the Gina Carano type of incident. You can look that up if you want to check it out. What's happened with the reaction coming with the Wall Street bets, people just going at those people, you can't do these because these certain things to them are sacrosanct. Certain pillars to them are supposedly above refute because of who's doing the things, who's under attack. It's a strange kind of situation that we're living in. And I think one thing that I made a video about the Wall Street bets thing, and one of the things that I crystallized, I was thinking about in that situation is what we're seeing right now in the United States of America and the world in general, is we're getting to a situation where people are becoming aware that the primary social structures that they live under are saying, we're not going to follow the rules and accepted social contract that we have with you. We're just not going to follow these things anymore. And they're pushing the lines. They're saying, how far can we get away with just admitting this? Because we can't hide. We can't pretend people can't look into the room anymore. And I think it's a bit tougher on people in the United States of America and some first world countries, because unlike developing countries and developing nations, I think people in developing countries are both less politically active, and the ones that are also a lot more jaded or not more realistic about the limitations of their politicians, in part because you can look at the first world and see, look, those countries are doing so much better. So our politicians say they're doing the best for our country, but we can see these countries doing better. We can see certain countries haven't gone through the same growing pains or same issues that we're going through right now and gotten past that, and now they're doing better, so why don't we do that? So they have kind of a big brother, an example to look forward to. But when you're in the United States of America, you're in front of the pack. So you're thinking, we're exceptional, we're different. Like, we have the best. Like, we're not Haiti, we're not Kenya, we're not Russia, we're not China. But when it comes down to it, you're still just people in some kind of agreement in a social construct that is civilization. And if the people who are running it don't want to follow those rules anymore, the thing crumbles just as easy as it does anywhere else. So that's something that I think I'm trying to reach out to my American friends out there. That, Stevens, I think, is more more realistic about this, having watched politics a lot longer, a lot stronger than most people, but realize that. So we're just finishing off. Steven just came in and say, like, I was just recording, and this is something that has happened before. We've had some issues with this, still working on this. The way we do this is we read a paragraph, a piece of the article, and then we discuss the article. And we're doing this over Skype, like I do the recording on Skype and separate, but then I'd be doing the screen recording. At least the screen recording is going to have the audio. So our faces now have come into the screen now. This is us. Hello. You've probably been watching this series already. But before, it's just been on the screen with the article. Or maybe I'll put a speed drawing or something else up there. But what I was saying was, before we get into the reading the article, was it's something that's, I think, is of a shock for some people. But that is reality. And that is the way things are. People were thinking, oh, the Republican Party is going to do this. Oh, the Democrats don't really mean this. The Democrats are really against lists. They're really against all these kind of things. Now they're doing it. Oh, Joe Biden's going to help us with these things. Now Joe Biden's in. Now it's not happening. Oh, if Joe Biden was in, we'd have had a plan to stop the actual pandemic. Like, it's so horrible. It's so bad. Joe Biden comes in. Oh, we can't really do anything for a couple of months. So the more people are aware of the way their politicians are, the way reality is, the more they have the ability to actually demand and actually get some better things in place. Because people just thought, no, all we had to do was switch the people. And if it's not Trump and these people, then we put Biden in there, and all of a sudden things will be okay. But no, it's the system. It's also you. What can you personally do on your day-to-day, on your every other day with other people in your life? What are the agency that you've given up because you think somebody else can do that better for you? Well, no, it actually comes down to you. It comes down to you, your neighbors, communicating, getting information like this. Even this article itself, it's showing that, look, this is what people did. It wasn't just the government. This is what people came together and did. So in a sense, there's a positive aspect that I see about this. This is showing that this is how people come together and do things. You can come together and do things. If you think this was a positive thing they did, you can help them. If you think it's a negative thing they did, you can go and build your own organizations or find a way to extricate yourself from the effect of people who are able to control institutions and things that are subject to things like this. And I think that's a positive place to be because it's more accurate to what reality is. But yeah.
Well, to your point, I always think of what Robert Barnes always says about QAnon, how that was one of the things that was bad about that was trust a plan, trust a plan. But you just have faith that something is going to happen. You're going to be less inclined to go out and do something. And then it's like, of course, all this time passed. Like, there were no mass arrests coming. There was no storm, all that. But his point is, if people had figured out sooner, that was just a psyop. Okay, they could have gone out and done things that would have actually made a difference.
Yeah. And that's a positive thing, because I think I've looked at different governments and I used to wonder why do places in Africa try out forms of governments, and the police are the way police were in the United States of America in the 80s and the 60s, or these kind of structures. They're trying these socialist kind of schemes, these schemes of nationalizing these programs. When you can look at countries in the West and they've done those things and failed by those things and moved on to new things. And I used to be one of the people who thought, oh, they were exceptional, they're somewhat different. It's like, no, they're just more ahead in the time. And the people are just different in their awareness and their involvement. And the politicians everywhere, people everywhere in general, will just do the bare minimum possible to get what they want done. So politicians in Africa can just get away with bribing people with just mkate na chai. I've mentioned that before in some of these conversations that I've had, Stephen, which is called tea and milk. I mean, it's called milk and mkate na chai, milk, tea, the chai, and bread. They just give you a little money, or they literally come by the village and things like that during campaign season, and they hire some people to go around and have small parties, small events, and they give people milk, packets of milk and tea, and then some packets of bread. And those people get excited about that time. Then they go vote for this person. And that's a very base level type of thing. Yet in first world countries, you have to be more sophisticated about it. Now you have to go through some kind of healthcare system where we're going to tax you, and then we're going to give you these social programs and these kind of things, and make sure you can bring in your family from these other locations. And then when you do that, we're going to make sure that if your kids go to this kind of school, first of all, we make sure they're paid for the school. Once they're in the school, we make sure there's jobs in the government that will give them that hyphenated studies position by making sure every government institution has to have a department for XYZ. So those are the kind of things. But it still comes down to mkate na chai. It still comes down to, I'm going to give you these little goodies, and then you're going to give me the vote. And the weird thing about this, though, is like the same thing I ask people when they come to mkate na chai. I wonder, why don't the people who get that mkate na chai go in and still vote for somebody else, vote for who's actually going to be good on them? But they don't really look past that. And that's also something I don't think people in the United States of America look past. And it's even harder for people in the United States of America to look past because of being in that higher standard of living type of society, where the goodies they're getting is a lot higher for just giving that vote, especially now when it's just like, just mail this in. Then they get all these ostensible goodies. They get to live in the United States of America and all these things. I can understand why people just fall to that, but trust me, people. If we look past that and demand more, people can do better.
Well, I just thought of the Obama phones too.
Yeah. How many? Yeah, like. Anyway, so let's get into the reading.
Sure.
Okay. So we're on securing the vote, and we'll try to get through at least this section. We're trying to get the audio parts of at least 3 parts out so far, and we're trying to get the parts into about an hour a piece at most. So we'll try to see how much we can do. How much have we done? I think we've been recording for possibly 30 minutes. Yeah, we've been recording for about 35 minutes. So let's get at least this section in, and then we'll see how much more we can get done. Okay. So securing the vote. You want to lead us off?
Sure.
Okay.
The first task was overhauling America's bulky election infrastructure in the middle of a pandemic. For the thousands of local, mostly nonpartisan officials who administer elections, the most urgent need was money. They needed protective equipment like masks, gloves, and hand sanitizer. They needed to pay for postcards letting people know they could vote absentee, or in some states to mail ballots to every voter. They needed additional staff and scanners to process ballots. Do you have much? I don't think there's much to say.
There's not much of this. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like this itself, there's some parts where people would definitely focus on, and there's some nefarious parts like the fortifying of the election, or the media turning on them, or setting up in the start when they're talking about how it's like the left-wing groups, liberal groups who just try and have protests, and then the right-wing militias were set up for battle. Those kind of framing and things like that, that's already been done in the start. So once they've propped you, they've framed that in that sense. And this is my whole contention with most of New York Times, these kind of places. It's not fake news. It's fawn news. It's selecting certain things. Certain aspects of it, they'll be like, okay, we're going to twist this around. But then everything else will just be a simple retelling of something that happened. And this is just an objective thing. These are things that people needed, and these people provided it. This is a basic process that you go through in an actual voting process. It's just normal. So someone's like, "Oh, how can you object to this article? They're just listing normal things that happen in an election." It's like, no, I'm not objecting to this part. I'm objecting to all the other things that were said, like with the AOC. I'm not objecting to her saying she was sexually assaulted. I'm objecting to her trying to say this is part of Ted Cruz having her murdered, because look at the times. Where did Ted Cruz send this person? So it's that kind of obfuscation that happens, and it's something to pay attention to.
Well, I was thinking of the stuff we did on the 1619 project. If you read a lot of those essays, they do that a lot. Like, they talk about earlier pushes for socialized medicine and how former, Dixiecrats, I guess they call them, were opposing it. So they try to link defenses of slavery to that. And there was another thing about the double entry bookkeeping, which they say, oh, the plantation owners use that. So when you do this banking today, that's descended from slavery. But they leave out that it was also done during the Renaissance. And they think the Jews did them even like going way back. So it's things like that where they're stating things that are factual, but it's framed in a way that it's like it sounds like, oh, they're just presenting facts, but it's clearly slanted to try and push a certain message.
Yeah. And that's part of why I think we'll be doing more of these kind of things, and that's part of why I try to provide actual sources of things and encourage you to call me out when I'm doing something wrong. Because here you can read what we're actually saying, what we're seeing here, and see if we're being disingenuous. And we have our own biases, so we're trying to put this out there so you can see where we're looking at things, and then you can maybe come in and tell us, okay, no, this is I think what they meant, and this is why I think you're going wrong. That's something we definitely encourage out there. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Next paragraph.
Sure.
In March, activists appealed to Congress to steer COVID relief money to election administration. Led by the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, more than 150 organizations signed a letter to every member of Congress seeking $2 billion in election funding. It was somewhat successful. The CARES Act, passed later that month, contained $400 million in grants to state election administrations. But the next tranche of relief funding didn't add to that number. It wasn't going to be enough.
All right, so I see the way they're trying to frame this. Again, this goes to what we keep saying about how they're making it sound like, well, this is what has to be done for the good of democracy, all that. And of course, they're going to have to admit, yes, there are wealthy people funding this, but they're trying to build it up in a way that it sounds innocuous. It's not. Because these are the same people who complain millionaires, billionaires influencing our elections, but they can't say that outright. So this is presented as, well, these election workers need these things. They went to Congress. They couldn't get enough money. Well, someone has to help them out. And of course, who that someone's going to be.
Yeah. This is something that I just want to ask. Why should elections cost this much? If this is the only way to secure election, then spend this amount of money. Let's say you just go per capita and you say, okay, this much is spent. And you hear you say, oh, look, America's so bad in healthcare because they spend this much per capita, this much per person. Like, do you hear people saying that? Oh, America's so horrible at voting because they have to spend this much per voter. When is that kind of thing brought up? But it just continues to be higher and higher amounts of money that's actually spent to be an actual candidate in this country, in the country of the United States of America. And it seems to be something that's increasing all over the world, where it's just like technology seems to be making a lot of things cheaper, but elections themselves continue to just increase in the actual cost of actually getting office. So what is happening with that? If you talk about these, when you talk about these things, like you just say with like the wealth, we say, oh, there's too much money in politics, but then now there's people being lauded. Oh, the first campaign to get $1 billion was Obama's campaign. Look how much they're raising. Now it's a constant thing now during election season. They finally raised $250 million this year. Oh, look, they raised this much money this year. And I understand why some people in the media are doing it, because you actually look at the actual figures of the amount of money these people make, because they're businesses. And the amount of money some of these companies make, some of these companies, because these are news companies. These are companies that are in the business of selling you news. They make most of their money during election time. You look at the actual precipitous drops that have happened in a lot of these places post-election, post the Trump-watching season of the 2020. It was like 4 years of election type of season for them, but then election season even ramped up higher. So you have this kind of thing where they have some interest in getting that kind of interest up, because they're like, look how much money we're going to get in advertising dollars. So there's an aspect for that for them to support. But the general public, there's got to be people out there who have thought there might be some better ways to use the technologies that we have now in order to have a cheaper and more accessible voting system. And I'm not one who's completely against having these other new forms of voting. My whole objection was I know what the state governments are like. Supposedly it's a pandemic, supposedly it's some kind of emergency time. To think there was actually going to be an ability to set up a system that you can all of a sudden take 40 million average people voting by mail up to 160 million and not have an incident and situation like what we've had after the 2020 election was an absurd thing to think of. So I was like, okay, yeah, whatever, let's do this, but let's kind of get this up and set up and so you can test these out. And then you do it in the 2024 election. You can have a thing where you can have mock elections. Why isn't the actual day of voting a national holiday? You have national holidays for some absurdities. I'm like, make the voting day a national holiday. I don't understand what is the issue with these kind of things. So there's all these frustrations that they have with the system that I think a lot of other people have. But you'll hear a lot of people not bring up those frustrations in part, like as you said, because their guy got in, so they don't want to talk about the system anymore.
Well, these are also the people who always say things like, we have money for war and all this. Like, how can we not fund healthcare? Well, you're the ones who are happy to spend $250,000 on election campaigns. I mean, how many college tuition payments could you make with that? I mean, how much healthcare could you provide with that? All this. But it's like you're fawning over these people who, if I pour all this money into this person, they're going to solve all these problems, you know?
Yeah, and those are the things that they're hoping to fund through that. They're thinking, we'll vote the people in and then they'll wipe out our debts. this is this thing. Like, I haven't really thought of any other field besides politics where people are proud to say they don't participate in it. They're proud to say they avoid information about it. They're proud to say they don't want to discuss it. Yet they'll want their vote and their opinion in the form of a vote to count as much as somebody who studies it, somebody who's in it. And those are the kind of things that I'm just very suspect about people. And then I think one more thing I'll mention here is these institutions that are being funded by the government in order to actually run. People say, oh, there's these conflicts of interest if you have a private incident, a private company paying or a lobbyist paying politicians for certain things. But all of a sudden, there's no other special interest in things like that. When it's the inverse, when it's the government funding certain institutions, those people who are parts of those public institutions are not going to have an interest in making sure that the government remains the size it is and gets bigger and bigger so they get more funding and get more money and keep their jobs. It's just some ridiculousness going on in these kind of things that people aren't they aren't seeing these things through, right? It's just very frustrating.
Well, I think, to add to your point, I mean, there's that point in Democracy and Political Ignorance, which got referenced briefly in our last series, where the author talks about how politics, it is the only thing we can think of where experts in the field, political scientists, economists, all that, will say, yes, we admit that most people don't know what they're talking about, but they should participate anyway. That's the only walk of life you see that. But if you survey political scientists, most of them, do you think everyone should vote? Yes. Do you think everyone should participate in politics? Yes. But then but do you think the public's well informed? No. Well, again, what other aspect of life do you see that in?
It's very, very, very frustrating stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so hit us up with the next paragraph.
Next one. All right, let's see here. Private philanthropy stepped into the breach, and an assortment of foundations contributed tens of millions in election administration funding. The Chan Zuckerberg Initiative chipped in $300 million. Quote, it was a failure at the federal level that 2,500 local election officials were forced to apply for philanthropic grants to fill their needs, says Amber McReynolds, a former Denver election official who heads the nonpartisan National Vote at Home Institute. All right.
Nonpartisan. We're going to let that go. Again, resistance. You are the resistance that has support of the Chan Zuckerberg Foundation, which is one of the most wealthy and influential people in the world. Bill Gates is all there supporting you and on other aspects of the things. You have top government officials who are in there who are just getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. Again, what are you resisting? This goes back to what we were talking about before. People aren't literal with what they're saying. When they mean resistance, they mean resistance in like the Star Wars resistance kind of sense, where it's like, oh, we're the resistance against the Empire, in that scripted kind of way, where they play fighting in their head. It's like a live action role playing type of thing where we're the resistance, and we actually come down to it. Like the Empire had its own peccadillos and stuff like that, but it was like the generally accepted. It didn't seem to be a dictatorship. It was just two different sides kind of fighting over the things. And yeah, you could say like the Sith are evil and all these. go into that aspect. Now on, Silas is defending the Sith. He's an evil human being. Whatever. No, all I'm saying is like these are the government and these are people fighting. Look at how that was framed as. So now anybody protesting right now, are they protesting now all of a sudden the just government? Is protest all of a sudden now a negative thing? Now the resistance is all of a sudden being turned into insurrectionists, like Insakupa terrorists and things like this. These words where it's like now they're just horrible people. You can't stand up. What are you doing fighting against democracy? Yet the last 4 years it was just this benevolent, great resistance for these nonpartisan, bipartisan type of people coming in, pulling away the corporations that were with Trump, and then they side with these poor, benighted people that don't have money to fund their elections and things like that. And we need $500 million more. $500 million isn't enough. We can't make that work. Yet we still need the public sector because the public sector is the best at doing these kind of things. Come on now, people. That's the consistency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Trying to think. That's really, I mean, it's pretty much just stuff I said before about prioritizing where the money's spent and all that.
Okay, yeah. And the thing is, if the money's in there, these people are giving the money. Are these going to be the same people? The people who are unable to do the stuff before, are they still going to be the people who are actually going to be doing the stuff now? Is it going to need more money? Are we going to need the exact same amount of money in the next election, or is it because of the pandemic was some special situation, so now we don't need all this extra support for next election? I don't know what's going to happen.
No.
Okay, so next paragraph.
Yep.
McReynolds' 2-year-old organization became a clearinghouse for a national struggling to adapt. The Institute gave secretaries of state from both parties technical advice on everything from which vendors to use to how to locate drop boxes. Local officials at the most trusted sources of election information. Local officials are the most trusted sources for election information, but few can afford a press secretary. So the Institute distributed communication toolkits. In a presentation to Podhorser's group, McReynolds detailed the importance of absentee ballots for shortening lines at polling places and preventing an election crisis. And Podhorser, for those of you who might just be jumping in on this series and this part, was the architect, and he's kind of been given the Emperor Palpatine, or the Jedi's, they have a head guy. I don't think the Jedi's have
Grandmaster. Yeah, Yoda is the Grandmaster.
They don't have a top guy like Palpatine.
Well, Yoda was the Grandmaster, but then like Windu was like one. Yeah, but then Windu was like one of the more powerful. But then there's the Council that sort of runs things. So.
Okay, so he's like the Council equivalent, but he was put as a guy who started the Council that ran the Jedi's. If you guys are the Resistance in that kind of sense, so he was kind of that kind of person. And so in a presentation to Podhorser's group, so she was there, and then they're talking about this is part of why they're saying bipartisan, because they're showing, it wasn't just Podhorser, but these people are coming in. But now you can claim to be bipartisan, but I think one thing we can admit, the dislike for Trump was not a partisan thing at all. No. So I think that's part of why this shadow campaign needed to save the country and fortify the election. So yeah, go ahead.
Well, this thing about trust is funny because it's like, lately that Axios poll came out about how few people trust the media. And it was something, like 12% of Republicans trust the mainstream media. And even a lot of Democrats don't now. And it is funny because a few of the reasonable Democrats who still talk to me have said, like, I get why you distrust the media. So even they are like, okay, these journalists are just Democrat bootlickers at this point. and it's like, and as I say all the time, bias in of itself is fine, but if you keep saying we're just presenting facts and that's clearly not the case, I mean, people are going to see through it after a while. Like if MSNBC says, we're a left-leaning channel, we favor Democrats, okay, fine. But then New York Times and everything else says we're just reporting. But now it's like, what color socks does Biden like? What flavor ice cream does Kamala like? What are the second gentleman and first lady discussing today? It's like, whereas with last 4 years, it was any little thing Trump did, he came under fire for.
And that's the thing. Even this isn't new; it's completely new. The aspect of it is how widely spread this actual information is, how many people are talking about it. And that to me is something promising, because Christiana Amanpour, for specific, there's other, I think Fareed Zakaria, there's other people on these major actual platforms that very early in Trump's administration came out and said, like, no, we're actually activists now. We actually have to actually tell a story in a certain way. That's why there was a complete admission that came out and said like 97% plus or 95% plus after the first 3 months of Trump being in office, how much had he done in 3 months to actually have this actually be there? 95% of negative news coverage, whenever he's mentioned, it's somehow in a negative story. This was done by bipartisan kind of polls and things like that, people doing research on that thing, and that was completely accepted. And then I think even recently, I think it was after the election or something. Think Jim Acosta or somebody affiliated with CNN came out and said, like, yeah, we're actually going to be reporting this in a different way. We're not going to talk about this. You have people coming out saying, oh, finally, we're reporters now. We can actually go into the press group and discuss in this kind of way. We don't have to be this antagonistic people against the administration. It's like, wait, no. You don't have to be antagonistic. You don't have to be friends. You just have to actually report. You actually go in there. That's supposedly what you're supposed to be, reporters. So that's the kind of situation that we're living in right now.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. All right. So I think is it you?
Yeah, it's me next. All right. Let's see here. Let's see here. Okay. The Institute's work helped 37 states and D.C. bolster mail voting, but it wouldn't be worth much if people didn't take advantage. Part of the challenge was logistical. Each state has different rules for when and how ballots should be requested and returned. The Voter Participation Center, which in a normal year would have supported local groups deploying canvassers door to door to get out the vote, instead conducted focus groups in April and May to find out what would get people to vote by mail. In August and September, it sent ballot applications for 15 million people in key states, 4.6 million of whom returned them. In mailings and digital ads, the group urged people not to wait for Election Day. All the work we have done for 17 years was built for this moment of bringing democracy to people's doorsteps, says Tom Lopak, the center's CEO.
Okay, so with this, I don't know what people mean by democracy to people's doorsteps. I don't know what people mean about we have the most educated voters. If you have a situation where there's debates, there's people coming out and campaigning, when you have a situation where you have half the possible voters having have voted a month before the election comes in, when there's supposedly still two more debates between the actual people voting, the actual candidates going, what are these people voting on? What is the actual thing that they're voting on? What are the actual policies and the things that they're voting on if they haven't heard that? Or is it just like, I'm going to vote this party, I'm going to vote against this person, regardless of what that person does, regardless of the situation? People decided who they're going to vote for. Like, what is your argument to have a time of voting over 3 months versus 1 day?
Yeah.
If it's 3 months, why not a year? Why not 4 years? Why not open up the voting for 2024 right now? Like, what is your argument against that? I'm seriously asking, if you are for this extended voting time, what is the parameters you're going to decide? For me, I'm thinking that whole day thing kind of works. And the majority of the states managed to do it on that 1 day. Even if the people sent the votes in, if you want to say that earlier because of the pandemic or these other situations that people have, but they were able to count them at least on that 1 day, or at least on that day of, majority of the states were able to say that, hey, we actually know we have this many in. Even in the states that couldn't do that, majority of the counties within those states were able to say, we have this many registered voters, we have this many adults, we have 10,000, look, we have 100,000 adults in our state, in our county. We know that 900,000, like 90,000 of them are eligible to vote. We know that 70,000 of them have registered to vote. We've sent out 30,000 and received 25,000, and the date of receiving them has passed. And we had 50,000 people come into the actual, or we had 40,000 people come into the actual polling positions that we have, the places that were actually set on the day of. So we might not be able to count all of those right now, but we can tell you by the time we've closed this, we can tell you that 65,000 people have voted that are allowed to vote. So in that situation, they know they have 100,000. If it comes to a situation where there's 100,001, they know, okay, this one person, there's been something wrong. If they get to a situation where like, okay, we mailed out 30,000, but we received 35,000, okay, there's something kind of wrong there. If it gets to a situation where, okay, we've sent out 35,000, but then let's say 90,000 or 70,000 of the people who are eligible to actually come in came in as well, then we know there's a problem there. Those are some of the basics that I see were just not being able to be done by certain specific places that were question marks in this. And what was the failure with these people? Are the people who are involved in it? And this might be a thing. The people who are involved in this kind of situations, I imagine some of them will be hung out to dry, will be given kind of the scapegoat situation. They'll be fired from their position or shuffled around and moved somewhere else. but I don't think most of them will really be punished that harshly by the current administration.
Yeah.
That could be my bias speaking, but time will tell on that.
Well, what annoyed me too is people keep using COVID as an excuse, but everybody is so selective about which COVID restrictions they follow and when. Like that was that whole thing over the summer where people were going out and protesting with BLM and Antifa for days on end, and they were like, "Oh, that's fine." But then mail-in voting, "Oh, we can't do that. We have to do mail-in voting. If we do go in person, we're going to get COVID." Okay, but you're fine with going out with groups of people. You know, Biden's win was announced. People are outside sharing champagne bottles in the streets. No problem with that. You know, I know somebody, not going to mention by name, but like they had this really strange fear where like they were getting food sent to their home because they were worried about COVID, but then they were going to like the locker room at the gym where people sweating and stuff. And then they recently went to a state that's very open. So like it's very strange how people will selectively follow things they want with this. I don't know. It's like they're selectively concerned about COVID, but at different times depending on what their priorities are. I don't know.
And that's a very human thing, and that's part of what was happening, and that's part of what's being shown in this. They were able to understand people's behavioral patterns. They were able to understand how to market to people. They're able to understand how to convince people to do certain things. That it's not necessarily forcing people to do things. Like I hate when we use they are forced to go to private sector. They weren't forced. No. They decided people take actions. So Binobo was forced to vote by mail. The black community hasn't been forced to vote for Democrats, 95% plus. So that hasn't been forced. They were convinced. They've been taught. They've been cajoled. Not even cajoled.
Conditioned, maybe. Conditioned.
Yeah, they've been conditioned to a sense. They've been sold. They've just been told the story. Like these are the kind of things that people make certain decisions. And if you think these are people that can be told and organized to do these kind of things, then they don't really have the agency capable to be able to make a vote. But I want to grant people agency when I can, as much as possible. I'd rather go on the side of the agency and say these people are able to do this than just say, oh, these are just programmed people, these are people forced to do these things. It's not that kind of situation. I don't think it is.
Well, also to add to the last point too, what annoyed me with the voting in person thing, it's like, oh, COVID, but it's like, do you guys go out shopping? Do you stand in lines at stores? Like, how different is that really? Like, you're not afraid to go in a grocery store and stand in long lines. Like, you know, my dad and I, we like to go to Aldi's. I don't know if you Aldi's, for those that don't know, it's kind of like Trader Joe's, but a little cheaper. And they have huge lines all the time. How many of those people waiting in line are saying, oh, we're going to mail by vote because we're worried about COVID? Okay, but you'll stand in line for half an hour, or whatever. I mean, no.
Yeah. As a little side note on the Aldi's thing, somebody had posted something on, it was like some tweet thing, something with like people posting their L's online or something. It was just some Twitter account that I followed. And then somebody had said, oh, I guarantee you that's not in America because we don't have Aldi's in America. It was something to do with a cashier or something like that. And I was like, no, there's most definitely Aldi's in America. And this is something that I was talking about before, how when people think about other countries or people from other countries, when you think about other countries, you assume certain things of them. You see like certain thing about Kenya on the news and think entire countries like that. And that's also what Americans do. They don't realize how massive the country is. And this person was like, no, there's most definitely Aldi's. Like I've been to a few states. I've been to Aldi's in a few places, but it's mostly like a small town location and things like that. Is it in Jersey? I haven't seen an Aldi's in New York City.
Well, this one actually is near Poughkeepsie, but it's in like the town of Poughkeepsie. So it's along like a major highway. So
that's the thing. Like the places I saw them was normally like in actual smaller township kind of town areas. I haven't seen them in the major cities. And this person was like, oh, I've lived in 5 states, been to other places. I'm like, yeah, well, you didn't see them, but people just say, oh, we in the United States don't have all these. It's like, no, you do. Yeah. And that's the thing that has come with this election. We in the United States don't have corruption. We in the United States have principled politicians. We don't have politicians who just go with, no, you do. Like you're human beings. Some of the things you might assume about your country and your countrymen might not actually be accurate. And I think getting information like this gets that better knowledge. And back to one more thing on the thing, they were talking about how, this is again, how literal are people with these things? They said, oh, the protests were okay because it was worth the risk. You had to actually go out. It was about race issues, about saving lives. And it's supposed to save the democracy. So if saving the democracy wasn't worth the risk of going out in person and voting, then what were you talking about with this kind of knowledge and this kind of words? So this is kind of thing that I just kind of ask up there.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
All right.
Is it me?
Yeah. Next is you. Yeah.
So the effort.
Yep.
The effort had to overcome heightened skepticism in some communities. Many black voters preferred to exercise their franchise in person or didn't trust the mail. National civil rights groups worked with local organizations to get the word out that this was the best way to ensure one's vote was counted. In Philadelphia, for example, advocates distributed voting safety kits containing masks, hand sanitizer, and informational brochures. We had to get the message out that it's safe, reliable, and you can trust it, said Hannah Fried of All Voting is Local.
All right, so a few things. First off, when they're saying many black voters, how are they arriving at this? Because I remember, like with the whole police thing, how people like John Oliver were like, oh, if I were black, I would be so terrified, all this stuff. But then it's like, what is it? Pew Research said something like 93% of black people surveyed want more police funding, or at very least to maintain the current level. So it's like, how are you arriving at that? Do you just assume because of your ideology this general group of people thinks this, or did you actually go out, conduct some sample? And that's when they make like these broad claims like this. I mean, I kind of wonder, because it's like, you're trying to virtue signal with the police thing, but then it's like if you ask people living in these areas, they're not going to say that. So
Yeah.
that just shows the disconnect. And then what else is there?
The
Civil rights
capitalization
group.
of black is there.
Yeah. Let's see here. Voting safety kits. Yeah, reliable message out there. I mean, that I'm not entirely opposed to. If they encourage people to vote in person and said, okay, we'll give you masks and stuff. I don't have a problem with that. I mean, whatever.
Yeah. And I think I agree right here that all voting is local, and I think that's something that we will see more of. We'll see this. It won't be a resistance, because that term is what exactly are you resisting?
Yeah.
I think there'll be a divestance. There'll be people divesting from the current system, and people realizing that, hey, we're going to be sanctuary citizens. We're going to be sanctuary people. My own president, instead of hashtag not my president, it'll be hashtag my own president. But people stop presiding over these things. The people who are more individualist, inclined, and things like that. The people who are more into that sense where they don't really participate in politics in this religious sense that some people do. They'll start looking at the local. You'll start seeing small townships, small towns, small areas where people come together in a more constructive way. And there'll just be things where people are like, okay, you're going to make this federal law, we're just not going to enforce it. And we already saw some of this happening in the pandemic. Some places would say, okay, we're going to have a lockdown here. The governor would say that. And then some township would be like, okay, we're not doing that. Like, you're going to send the feds in here to do that? Like, you're just not going to do this. Somebody's like, they think you're going to see a lot more of that happening. I think that's positive. Another positive aspect of it, I think, if you're going to have a system of voting, I think it's best to have that local voting. You're going to see certain people starting to say, like, okay, we're going to vote with our feet. We're actually going to be more in touch and more aware of our local actual officials, because they're actually coming in with some of those main things on the local basis. You're going to see certain communities come out and be more open about that. Some places this week, we're progressive, we're on critical theory, and then the town next by it will be like, we're for none of that stuff. And I'm for that kind of discrimination. I want people to select. I want to go to a place where I can share my personal thoughts as much as possible, and then have the best idea of what other people in there think about. And so I can be like, okay, do I want to associate with these people, rather than get to a place where people are feeling they can't tell me all these things that I would actually find disagreeable, but they would still do those things anyway. So I'd rather have these micro communities in different places testing out, this is how we're going to do this here, this is how we're going to do that there. And then you see who's going to have the most successful type of society. And I think that's part of what the United States of America was so great, was these small different little labs and these experiments of different ways of doing things within some kind of controlled environment, with some kind of similar level of access to resources and language in some sense. And there was just positive things that I think can make a comeback post this whole smorgasbord of fortification. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to add to your point. I mean, the founders wanted this local government to have a lot more power. That's why, what was the 17th Amendment, where it was the state governments appointed senators, because that was the idea, is you live in the local area, you keep track of your state officials, so then you know who they're appointing for senator, and then if they make a bad appointment, you vote them out. That was the whole idea. But because these are people in your community, you know who they are, you can keep an eye on them, and then say, okay, you're going to put this person we don't like in charge, you're out next time. And then the other concern with that too, my understanding is it had to do with the finances as well, because again, if it's somebody appointed by the state government in that state, you know who it is. But the concern is if they're running on a national level, different people, different states will give them money because they want favors in that state, and then it's easier to sell out and things like that.
Yeah. And you just have that thing, like here in Kenya, most of the politicians live in Nairobi. Then during election time, you find them going to their constituents, and then they come back. And that's something you also see happen increasingly in the United States of America. They spend most of their time in D.C., all the institutions, most of the major institutions are in DC. They're staffed by people who live mostly born and raised in DC. They just become there. There's this kind of just embedded environment that is rather out of touch with the rest of the United States of America. Most of those people will probably think there is no Aldi's in the United States of America because there's no Aldi's in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And most of those people vote Democrat. It's a general way of looking at the world. And I think if you had more of these things, somebody just put a good decision, like when you have like the ministry, the Department of Transportation in like in Wyoming, then the farming down in Nebraska, then like you have like the fisheries in California. You spread these places around, and you have the ability for people to travel and people to move around and get to actually mingle and be among the actual people. When you took this thing with the senators, I think they changed the situation where it was, I don't know, was it changing how they were picked or how they're funded or the lobbyists, where you don't have the term limits as well, so that people get stay embedded. So it kind of makes more sense for you to invest in one person that you know this person likes these kind of things. So you just invest in lobbying that person, then you make sure that person stays in. That's why you have a situation where, in general, when people are talking about Congress in general, they think, okay, there's a very low approval rating. But when it comes down to their particular person who panders to them, they really like their person. So they think, if we could get everybody else in Congress to be like my person, then things would be okay, rather than realizing it's just something with the system that's never going to happen, actually, in the way that it actually is.
No.
But yeah.
It's like it's almost like the carrot and the stick thing, but the carrot just keeps moving, so you can never get it, and you keep getting poked with the stick. Yeah, in the process.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So.
Yep. I'm next. At the same time, Democratic lawyers battle a historic tide of pre-election litigation. The pandemic intensified the party's usual tangling in the courts, but the lawyers noticed something else as well. Quote, the litigation brought by the Trump campaign of a piece with the broader campaign to sow doubt about mail voting was making novel claims and using accepted theories no count has ever accepted, says Wendy Weiser, a voting rights expert at the Brennan Center for Justice at NYU. Quote, they read more like lawsuits designed to send a message rather than achieve a legal outcome, end quote. All right.
So this is a take. I think it's more of an opinion.
Yeah.
And this has been done from people on both ends. I think right now what's happening with the impeachment, I don't think there's a very minute chance, even just from the basic politics of the matter. I don't think it's clearly not, it definitely hasn't happened before. There's clearly nothing in the Constitution that allows for impeaching a private citizen.
No.
Although, since, as I mentioned, the structure itself, the country is just as good as the people who are running the country, that run that social contract. It's as good as the people who accept it. But when you have the people who are supposedly the arbiters of said social contract being asked, are you guys breaking the law? And they just come out and say, nah, we don't think we are. And then they just keep going the kind of thing. But enough people are practical into the whole political animals wanting to keep their job that you're not going to get 2/3 of the people to actually vote to actually censure him. And even if you did censure him, how are they going to enforce him not running if he decides to run again? So there's these aspects. For me, that's what I'm most interested in. I just want the end of it to happen, to see what the outcome's going to happen, because the process itself, to me, is a kangaroo court. It's a sham. It's more about sending a message than it is for any actual legal outcome. Because what legal outcome do you think can be enforced? What's impeachment about? Impeachment is about removing a president from office. He's not in office. So that's not the legal outcome. There is no legal outcome. Another legal outcome for impeachment supposedly is barring them from running from office again. He hasn't mentioned if he's going to run again. So if that's the legal outcome that they think is going to happen, if it hasn't been achieved in a legal way, you cannot enforce it. They don't have a sitting judge of the Supreme Court sitting on the case. You have a senator from the Democrat side who's supposedly the judge, and he's also going to get to vote on the actual thing of the judge. Yeah. So he's controlling the case. He's saying, okay, you can say this, you can submit this. That's not allowed. That's
it's a kangaroo court.
Yeah. Then he's going to go vote on the things that he said. Like, come on now, people. Yeah. So this is not what legal outcome. There's no really enforceable legal outcome that can come from this. So this is mostly about sending a message to Trump and anybody else from the outsider that might actually try to upset the apple cart, as they say.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, I mean, we talked about this before, but like, you know, if it wasn't the Capitol Hill riot, they would have looked for something else. They've hated him since day one. They try to get him out since day one. You know, it's like they want to make sure he can never run again. I would argue, I would take it further. I would say they don't want any outsiders to run again. So they're really sending that message. So if it wasn't this Capitol Hill thing, they would have figured out something else. And the way this is being described, it almost reminds me, you know, again, it's Godwin, what is it, Godwin's law, where the Nazis come up or something. But I think of it, Nazi Germany, they had the quote unquote people's court that were going to try the people who tried to kill Hitler in the Wolfslayer plot. But of course, who are those judges? They're people that are just automatically going to side with Hitler and everything, and have the people who did that executed. So it's like, it's obviously not what they say it is. And it's the same thing with this. It's like, they're acting like there's no outcry from the general public to impeach Trump. Like, I think even the severe Trump derangement syndrome people are kind of like, okay, he's out, let's return to normal. I don't think there's some huge outcry to throw him in jail or something. Oh.
And I think I'd also like to mention this, and I had somebody comment on one of these videos, and I forget your name right now, but I appreciate the comments and went back and forth with them, and hopefully you're still watching the continuation of this series. But they were saying something that I've seen from other people, and they were somebody who were like, this is sedition, this is illegal, like these people need to be in jail. And so like it reminded me of the whole lock her up type of thing from Hillary Clinton type of thing. And then now people say, okay, Trump must be locked up. So I'm telling people both sides of the political aisle or any other place, people on the left who think Trump is going to be in jail and thrown into jail for all these evil supposed things that Nancy Pelosi and all these people had been threatening and saying that he's been doing, and then media sources have been saying, they sold you a false bill of goods. They're not going to do it. Joe Biden's not going to set that precedent to actually do that. They're not going to do that. And then the people on the Republican side, on the pro-Trump side, and things like that. This is what government is like. This is what most of the world has been dealing with. It's what I falsely thought that America was an exception to, and a lot of you have thought that. But I say, like, with reading this so far, nothing mentioned in this article so far has been illegal.
No.
Nothing mentioned in here has been out of the system. These are all things that are allowed in the system that has been there. These are all things that have been happening to some lower extent without you knowing about them before. These are things that will still happen in the 2022 election. Most of these things will still happen in the 2024 election because these things don't change that fast. But now you're aware of them. Now that you know about it at the local level, you can do something, or you can actually agitate them, because these are also individuals. They're doing stuff that they can get away with. But if you find ways through this actual structure, in this civil manner, maintain the civilization, maintain the social contract that we have, and just people like me and Steven can sit here, and then we can all of a sudden just throw down this unspoken contract that we have and just start hurling at each other and cutting each other off. And it would not be effective to actually what we're trying to do. But we come to the decision where we're saying, we're trying to accomplish this. And there's a myriad of ways to actually accomplish this. So let's follow these kind of structure and rules that we've done. I could just be like, I'm just going to read the rest of the article by myself. That will reduce the actual effort of the thing that me and Steven were trying to accomplish here. So that's one thing that I'm saying. If you read this article and you're finding it as abhorrent and surprising and shocking that as I do, as Steven does, try to be contained and like they were. Like these people, what happened, like, and even it was mentioned in the section between this, there was people who were going to hysterics, and they're like, okay, we're going to avoid those people with the hysterics, like, no, that lady in green yelling.
Yeah.
Let's sit and see. Let's have some cool and collected heads and see what we can do and plan and set up how we're actually going to achieve what we want to achieve. They were able to do this. You have your means of doing this, or you have your means of extricating yourself from the system and the effect of these to a general extent. This isn't Nazi Germany. This isn't Pol Pot. You're not living under Mao Zedong right now. Right now. Doesn't mean it can't happen.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's happened. I don't think the chances of it happening. I think the fact that Steven and I can make this video, that you can watch this and you can listen, is part of why that stuff won't happen, because we can look at those examples and say, this is what we're not going to do. So I think that's something to keep in mind. And again, everything in here has been legal. If you think there's a reason for them, if you're thinking in your mind these people need to go to jail, find the actual law. Find the actual thing you think they actually violated, and then test the system. Just like right now, if people are thinking Trump is going to be impeached or go to jail, he did nothing illegal in that speech. There's no actual evidence to impeach him on. The Democrats don't care. They're going to vote party line anyway. Yeah. Those 6 Republicans are probably still going to do it to make whatever message that they're going to do with Mitt Romney, I think Ben Sass, and I think like 4 other people. They're going to go anyway. They're not basing this off of evidence. It's not based off of an actual legal outcome. This is about messaging. It's about politics. So people need to wake up to that on both sides of the aisle or any other aspects. This is good to actually know this information.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
So there's that one paragraph left.
Okay. In the end, nearly half the electorate cast ballots by mail in 2020. Practically a revolution in how people vote. Practically the revolution in how people vote. About a quarter voted early in person. Only a quarter of the voters cast their ballots in the traditional way, in person on election day. This is what I was saying. They're somehow thinking that it's something worth lauding that only a quarter of the American people decided to wait until all the information was in about the candidates to vote on the actual election day. That they still call it election day, which is now a mockery of the term day.
Yeah.
But if you get to mock what revolution is, if you get to mock what a Nazi is, if you get to mock what racism, sexual assault, all these other terms are, then why not bastardize and Americanize the term election day as well, where election day can now refer to a 3-month session. Election day can continue until after election day. It's still election day. It's like election season now. That's what I'm saying. Like, why don't you make it election year? Like, what's the actual thing? And
Well, that's like how restaurant week in the city, it's like 3 weeks, but that was the joke, was that it was 1 week and then it became popular, so it became 2 weeks and it became 3 weeks. And I think I'm trying to think if it was even 4 at one point, but that's the joke, is they kept expanding it because it was it's usually done during a slower time of year, so the idea is to entice people to come in when things are quiet, but because it does well and you'd be slow otherwise, people they extended it in that time.
Yeah, and I guess there's also a difference with saying like a revolution versus a grassroots revolution. They don't have to be specific. Like, something can be very contrived and planned and still be a revolution. It doesn't necessarily have to be like grassroots from the people, because this was something that was very planned and looked forward. And some people, I might try to find the locations where this has been discussed, but some of this was definitely being discussed pre-pandemic. There's a lot of people who think, oh, the pandemic happened or the pandemic was started in order to get this going. That's some Q type conspiracy theory stuff that I'm not getting that deep into. And the cool thing about conspiracy theory, that term was actually invented by the CIA around before the time when JFK got assassinated. And that was in part put out there in the regular lexicon, so people who were objecting to the things CIA were done could be written off as conspiracy theorists. But if you look at the history of the actual term, it hasn't existed before that. So that's kind of an interesting thing.
Actually, somebody told me it goes back further, but as far as common parlance, that's when it really started. Because I think, if I remember correctly with the JFK stuff, they didn't explicitly say conspiracy theory. It was like issues of conspiracy, like plots of conspiracy, and that eventually just became conspiracy theory. It became shortened from that, but it was that general idea. Yeah.
They started seeding it in the lexicon to be that kind of sense. And this is the thing, like, words change, terms change. And that's the thing. Some of these things, the language could be changing. Some of the things I'm the one that's behind, like Uncle Phil. Some of them like dope, like stupid, and like, what are you talking about? Yeah. Just like, I remember when I was a kid, people were like, that's like, who's bad? Bah, 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 bah.
Yeah.
People were like, what do you mean bad? It's like, bad was good. So some of that could be this. People, the young whippersnappers out there speaking their slang about who's a Nazi and all these kind of things, and I'm like, what? But they're like, no, I really mean a Nazi, dude. What are you, square? Like a square. Square used to be like a bad. So anyway, there's many things to think of, and yeah, that's the end of the section. Anything else you have to say on this one?
Nope, that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Okay, so that's our thoughts on this. The next section is disinformation to defense. That's like 5 paragraphs. Sure. It's getting kind of late for recording on this end, so maybe you want to pick this up tomorrow, Stephen?
Yeah, that's fine. Sure.
How early do you think you can start recording tomorrow?
I mean, I'm up maybe like 9 or 10 in the morning, so I don't have anything planned. So it's like, morning is fine for me if it's easier on you. I don't mind. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to get up at 7 or something, but I mean, if it's like 9 or 10 in the morning here, I don't mind. No.
Okay, so for you guys listening, guys, girls, and everything else in between, thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this. I'll get this published and posted. There was some issues at the start. We were recording, and they hadn't started recording the actual screen of it, so we were only recording the actual visual. So I think I'll think of putting some kind of speed drawing on the screen at that time when that's going on. But I'll get this up as soon as possible, and then I'll get to Stephen tomorrow morning, and we'll get at least 2 parts in tomorrow, because we got 1, 2. There's 2 are short. Yeah, so there's a lot of short parts coming up. So right now, we have securing the vote we just did. We have disinformation defense, then spreading the word, and then people power and strange bedfellows. Yeah, we should be able to, at least, these are very short, so we should be able to get those done in at least 2 more days. We should be able to record the rest of this actual thing. And with these ones, I've been posting them as fast as I can get them out there, because this is a kind of a live story. And then I finally posted the last part of the previous series that we had, which was Cracks in the Ivory Tower. And coming up, this is a test of what's going to be coming up with a human action series that I'm super excited about. That's going to be just talking about the book Human Action by Ludwig von Mises. And with that one's going to be a lot of breakdown like this. At least the first section, we're going to actually read the entire thing and have a discussion like this. And I might still trying to think of how to cajole. I'm going to look at what the black community has been done to vote 95% in one way and see if I can convince Stephen to vote on just reading the entire thing. But it's a long book, so that would take like over a year. But I'm down for that. So we'll get to that when we get to that. Thank you for listening. Anything else, Stephen?
Nope, that's all I have.
Okay, so that's it for us, and signing off.